Hello everybody, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening depending on where you are in this amazing world. My name is Donovan Jolly and welcome everybody once again for another video of DIY investing. Since my time in cryptocurrency, I've always waited for this exact moment in the market. I've always been a firm believer that Bitcoin was going to be the thing that we could all invest in that would give us a hedge against the current failing financial systems. Since the time I've been in crypto, I've always believed that, and I've always continued to stick with that natural bias. Today, we're going to be diving into two amazing charts that show exactly what is taking place on the long-term perspective and why I'm still long-term bullish and really why I haven't changed my perspective on that. Make sure you guys stay to the end so you don't miss out on any of this information because these charts are really going to help paint the clearest picture for the long term so that we're all here in the knowing and we're not so fearful by all of the short-term price action. My goal for this video is 1,000 likes, so make sure you guys smash that like button and help me get to that goal for this video. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button and then click the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos like the one provided for you here. Remember guys, I also have a Discord server that is totally free for you guys to join, so if you want to just join a community, we have almost 4,000 members in here, so it's a really awesome way for you guys to talk to some of the other people in the space. I also offer some of my more exclusive content through here, my course and signals. The course is 20 educational videos that teach you guys all of the same strategies that I use to profit inside of crypto. It's all of the things that I use in my everyday technical analysis, so if this is something that you guys want to actually do for yourself, I highly recommend that you guys check that out. Now the signals are a way for you guys to actually copy my personal portfolio and all of the long-term investments that I'm taking. This is a really easy way for you guys to follow all of my long-term portfolio and then know exactly what percentages I'm holding of each and when exactly I'm going to be taking profits over this next cycle. So make sure you guys join by clicking the invitation link in the description of this video, and there you're going to get access to my Discord server. Alright guys, we got a lot of really cool charts today that are going to explain exactly what's taking place, so let's jump right into this video. So the first chart today is going to be taking a look at the overall market cycle graph. Now I want to talk about this one because there's a lot of fear that's taking place inside of the market. I can definitely attest to that. I've seen a big sentiment shift inside of the market. Now what I noticed was the fact that there still was a lot of people that were bullish up here. I would assume that the vast majority of people were bullish. I know that I was bullish and I'm not going to try and say that I wasn't, but I think that the vast majority of people were bullish, and then we actually ended up selling through that long-term trend line. And you guys know that I've brought this up a couple different times in the last few videos, especially on the podcast. The fact was we had this big long-term trend line that Bitcoin had been performing off of and had been accumulating off of, but with this most recent dump we actually sold through that. Now what I noticed was this big sentiment shift. Now what I noticed was the fact that everybody for the most part was bullish up here, a lot of people were, and then when we sold through this trend line, a lot of people then became bearish and a lot of people were expecting further downside targets. Now it's very similar to what happened at 6K support. We consolidated at this support zone for a while. This was the support zone everybody thought would hold, and then we sold through that and actually went to new lows. Now when this sell-off actually took place, everybody was calling for $1,100 Bitcoin and people were expecting Bitcoin to really sell off, and some people were even calling it down to $800. Now that was the bottom, and that was actually where the major sentiment shift happened, where for the most part there was a lot of people bullish at 6K, and then when the support fell everybody was bearish to new lows, and then we actually held support and then went into the new highs. Now this reminds me a lot of what we saw as far as the sentiment goes, where we made this higher high and we had maintained support above this trend line. This was the trend line that even held us during the first sell-off. But what recently happened was we sold through that. Now, to me, I think that this is kind of what was needed to shake out the rest of the market, to get all of the other people capitulated so that they could actually kind of go back into this new cycle. Now, even though I was bullish here at this trend line, the fact that we sold through doesn't mean that I'm just going to magically switch my bias and just start saying that we're going to go to new lows. But that's the thing that I've noticed a lot of people have done thus far. And that's what I think is really important to note, just from my personal perspective, having the Discord with 4,000 people in it, you do start to gauge a lot of how sentiment goes with the average retail investor inside of the market. And that's what I've noticed, is the fact that a lot of people are very bearish, when just a few weeks ago a lot of people, those same people that hit me up that are no longer interested in buying, were the same people that were asking me to buy just a couple weeks ago. And so I'm noticing the sentiment change, and I think that it's something to point out. Now we're going to go into this graph here, and this is basically just the valuation of a market cycle. This shows kind of the curve that it takes with the stealth phase, awareness phase, mania phase, and then blow off phase. Now I've gone through and labeled Bitcoin's chart because I wanted to go through this and kind of compare it to the two cycles and what we're seeing, because this one has a little bit of a deviance from this conventional market cycle, but I still want to talk about the overall conception that it seems to tell. Now, the way that we're going to go through this, I've labeled the stealth phase, awareness, mania, and blow off. And you can see here that this chart labels it and also follows it. Now, during the stealth phase is where you have smart money. This is where all of the if you go back and look at Bitcoin charts on exchanges, you're going to notice that a lot of exchanges, the only real price history that they have starts from really this bottom here. And even from the bottom just to the first breakout, you're going to see a lot of exchanges, and that's really all of the data that they have. And that's why it follows this graph so perfectly. This is the stealth phase. This is when the first exchanges like Coinbase started keeping track of Bitcoin, and it was really in that phase in which a lot of the smart money that began entering the market. Then you go into this awareness cycle. This is really where you have the first sell-off. This is where the trend starts to steepen. Now, the first sell-off, I would actually conclude that as 2016, maybe shortly after 2016, 2017. China banned Bitcoin, and it was right at that all-time high mark, and we ended up selling off about 20 to 30% from that point in just a matter of a couple hours. Well, a couple days, I should say. Now, from that point, that was actually the last sell-off, or the first sell-off, before we went into this major parabolic move, right? Now, this is where you get media attention, enthusiasm, public, greed, delusion, new paradigm, and then we start the retrace, right? Now, from that point, we noticed that we start the bearish cycle back down, but the only difference that we had was this short-term correction that we saw in Bitcoin from 20K down to 3.2. We never actually sold through that mean trend line that held us throughout the entirety of that cycle. Now, based off of this market cycle, despair is when you actually smash through that trend line, and then that's when everybody thinks that the market is done, we're over, we're going to go to new lows. Only that's when the market rebounds and we go on the upside. But the thing is, guys, we never actually experienced that inside of this correction. When we sold off from 20K, we went to 3.2, only we held support of that previous trend line. And then we ended up going for a higher high. Now, what recently happened was we broke through that. After we made this higher high, we consolidated. Then once we came back into content of this trend line, we actually sold through that. Now, this is really important because I think that this entirely is just an elongated correction. And from this initial sell-off from about 20K to 3.2K, yes, it followed this same retail investor and it followed this same cycle and it looked very similar. But I think that this was mainly capitulation for the dumb money, the retail investors. Because you guys got to remember that up to this point, this entire cycle was 100% retail investors. It was just random people that would buy and sell Bitcoin. Yes, you did have billionaire investors that were smart and were able to see the trend. But you got to remember that we didn't really have any institutional involvement until about 2018 when futures got added. And so if we go through here and look at the cycle, I do believe that we're still following this overall trend. It's just the fact that we kind of had to shake out a little bit longer before we could totally capitulate the market. Now, what I believe in my theory, what we saw was from 20K to 3.2K, that was the shakeout of the retail investors, right? Now, from 3.2K to 14K, this current correction that we saw when we just barely corrected from about 10.5 all the way down to about 3,800, I think that that was actually the minor capitulation because I believe that both has to happen before the new cycle can actually start. Now, a lot of people are going to be really mad saying that I have no reason to be bullish because I was bullish before we dropped. Now we dropped for some reason. Everybody's mad that I'm bullish still. But the thing is, guys, the long-term prospect of Bitcoin has yet to change. And I've once again thought that this was going to be a good hedge for the failing system. And now that the system, in what my opinion is now failing, we should see the aftermath of Bitcoin kind of taking that bulk of new value and heading into its revolutionary rise. Now, looking here, I think that with this sell-off, you guys now know, and you've probably heard it if you follow anybody on Twitter, but we've been talking about the fact that Bitcoin has to be above a certain price for miners to actually profit. So what that means is it's actually cheaper for you to go buy Bitcoin on exchange than it is for you to actually mine it. And so what we have happening is this major problem where it's now no longer profitable for miners to mine Bitcoin. And so what happens when we do that is a lot of miners will actually stop mining entirely. Now, for me, I don't think that the majority of miners are going to do that. I think that the biggest mining pools will mine at a loss for a significant majority of time, and the biggest mining farms mining farms will continue to mine at a loss, because I don't think that they think that the price is going to continue to stay at this cheap values and stay at a discount. I truly believe that this is just short-term miner capitulation, and really what we're going to see is just the short-term correction before we rebound up to this halving. Now, I think that this is just elongated blow-off phase. It's not quite as correlated with these ones. I think that we corrected a little bit longer. Now, retail money capitulated at 3,200, and I think miners capitulated here with this recent sell-off. And so, in theory, we should see the next rise inside of Bitcoin. Now, this takes me to the next part of the video. This is the next part that I want to talk to you guys about, because I've noticed a pattern here inside of Bitcoin, and this quite honestly could be the most important part of this entire video, because of this simple prospect that I found in the long-term trend of Bitcoin. I do believe that this is actually the bottom and we've just entered capitulation. Now, like I said before, I think retail investors capitulated at 3,200, but I think that the miners had to capitulate here before we could truly start this next bull trend. Now, what we've noticed inside of Bitcoin, and something that's been brought out by a lot of different analysts, is the fact that each parabolic trend gets less and less parabolic, and we can see that. Each one of these black lines shows the parabolic trend. We bounce off of this trend line before we actually kind of sell through that, and then we start another parabolic trend that's just not quite as steep as the first one in its place. And we can see that this parabolic trend has gotten less parabolic with each cycle. And this is something that we've paid attention to. And one thing I wanted to point out is one of my alternatives a few months back was the fact that I said that we could enter an even elongated cycle as the ones previously, where we have an even less parabolic one as the last cycle that even takes more amount of time to develop. And so I think we could very easily start seeing that with Bitcoin being expensive, with institutions starting to buy this dip. I think that we could start an even more consistent uptrend in its place, whereas previously I had targets set for about 2021. Now that we're starting to see this sort of capitulation taking place, I do believe that we could see a much longer cycle, and we could see about a 4-year cycle in its place. Maybe something of about 1,000 days to 1,100 days. That would put us pretty close in proximity to the time frame that I would be looking at. And the reason for that is because this trend seems to be continuing to play out. Now, what I've noticed here is the fact that after we make this parabolic trend, the only way that capitulation happens is once we smash through the previous trend line, and then we start a new parabolic trend in its place. And this pattern has happened every single cycle. We can see that at 2011 to 2012, we started the new trend, and capitulation took place after we broke through the previous trend line that held us during the last cycle. Now, we can see that we topped out in 2013 at $1,100, and the same thing happened again. We had this black trend line that held us at the start of that parabolic advance, but we only capitulated after we sold through and broke down from that last trend line. Guys, this is the same thing. Now, this is where the cycle has a little bit of variance, but I think that what we could be experiencing is just an elongated cycle. Once again, we could see a lot longer cycle that takes a lot longer time to play out. And so this is why I'm much more focused on the long-term cycle, and why I'm looking at the long-term always, because in the short term, when you have these massive volatility price swings, when you have liquidity crunches like we just saw in the economic markets, it's going to create a lot of volatility, and it will shake you out if you don't have a thorough plan in place. To me, this channel is called DIY investing for a reason. I'm focused on the long-term prospect, because I think that that's where we'll make the most money together. Now, what we saw, and what I've continuously said amongst this video, was the fact that I think retail capitulated at 3,200, but what we had to see was once again another capitulation of the old trend, which in this case was miner capitulation. It is now not profitable for miners to actually mine Bitcoin. It's cheaper for you to go buy Bitcoin on an exchange, and so we're having this big crunch that's taking place. Now, I do believe that this is going to be the same thing that took place back in here and back in here, and we're just going to start a new parabolic trend in this new cycle. And really, based off of the last two cycles, the only way that we start this new trend is when we smash through the previous trend line. And now we have just done that. for me, I'm not really too scared about what's taking place. Yes, it's a little bit shaky that we've sold off right before this halving. A lot of people were expecting us to moon into the halving, and I think that that's exactly why we saw this shakeout. It's what was needed to really shake out all of the weak hands before we go into this next parabolic trend. And so for me, guys, I've yet to sell a cent. I've actually seen a lot of people in my Discord that have panic sold over the last couple days. And to be quite honest, I think that that's a major mistake. However, I want you guys to know that I could be totally wrong with all of this. And that's why in every one of my videos, if you click in the description of each, I have a disclaimer. And it's because I'm wrong all the time, and that's the thing about the markets, is they're going to prove you wrong consistently. That's why you have to have a thorough plan. And to me, when I stick to the long-term prospect of Bitcoin and I stick to this long-term trend, I've always believed in the fundamental use case for Bitcoin and these cryptocurrencies, specifically blockchain technology. And really, the fundamentals of Bitcoin and blockchain technology have only continued to grow. And so to me, I am going to continue to hold the length of this trend, whether the shakeout goes a little bit lower or whether we start to bounce over the next couple months. You know, we're going to have to watch and see what the market really gives us. But to me, I'm going to continue to hold the length of this trend because I do believe in the longevity of crypto. Now, what we're seeing is a lot of uncertainty in the markets. We could see a total shutdown in America. What we're seeing in China is them actually starting to kind of get a top and get the top of the curve with this virus that's taking place. And so the way I look at it, guys, is this is a big shakeout. What we're seeing here is a lot of fear inside of the world. Now, to me, the fact that China's already got a hold of this virus situation, China also owns about 60% of the hash rate towards Bitcoin. So obviously, I think China is the biggest driver for cryptocurrency value. Now, to me, even if America goes through this major pandemic and we shut everything down and it crashes the global markets, I do believe and have always believed that cryptocurrency was going to be the hedge for all of that. And so for me, even with crypto starting to sell off with the S&P and we're starting to see that correlation, I think that that correlation will end. And even though I could be wrong and we could completely collapse here, I've always believed that cryptocurrency was the hedge for that failing system. And so I'm going to follow that plan and I'm going to stick to that. Now, a lot of you guys can do whatever you want. At the end of the day, I've always told you guys that it should be your own analysis that you follow. At the end of the day, I like to just give my own perspective on things, and this is really the perspective that I'm following. I've noticed a pattern that has played out in every single cycle. In fact, I even noticed it previously before when we actually found support here. Even though I got short-term bullish, this was still something that I had been watching for and had paid attention to. I had noticed the fact that we had capitulated, and the only way we capitulated was selling through the previous trend line. And I knew that when we bottomed here, this was us holding support of that old trend line. And so to me, it makes sense why we sold off. There were analysts that had this as a correction, and so shout out to everybody that was able to actually kind of get that with their analysis. To me, I was wrong, and I'm going to live and die by my mistakes, but I didn't sell anything. And so really, have you made a mistake if you are selling? Or if you didn't sell, I should say, because that's one thing that I've noticed with being a long-term investor in crypto is the fact that you're going to have these big shakeouts. And honestly, if you would have just held through any of these big shakeouts previously, you would have been fine. And so I'm going to just stick to that trend. I'm going to hold to my cards. I'm going to play that as my trading plan is kind of structured me to do. And so that's really the analysis that I had for you guys. I just wanted to make sure that kind of we're all on the same page with this. I wanted to give my long-term scenario with this. I'm not really trying to look at the short term right now because I think that that's more or less going to confuse everybody. I like to stick to the long term, especially in times of max volatility, because a lot of the people that follow me really want to know what's taking place on a bigger trend. Now, for me, we've still maintained a higher high. For me, the long-term trend is still in place, and in fact, we could just be starting a new one over. Now, if I go like this, I'm going to do that. Let's zoom in here for a second, and let's theoretically assume that we can kind of see where this new trend might follow. Let's delete this trend line here. Now, what I've been showing you guys with, what I've been sharing with you guys is this triangle perspective that we're correcting in. And I think that this is still true, and this is still the primary corrective pattern. But what I'm noticing here is the fact that I think that this could be about the bottom of this new trend. And we could see something along the lines of this in this next cycle. Now if we come back here, let's remove the resistance. Now if we come back here and draw the previous trend line, we're going to see that this new trend line would be even less parabolic and it would be longer in duration. And so for me, guys, this is my primary that I'm sticking to. I think that the long-term prospect is still very much in play. The only real difference is we just had to have a little bit of a longer correction. And so for me, I think that we're about to start this new parabolic trend, which is going to take a lot longer period of time. But really, I think that this is really the new trend that we're starting, and this was capitulation before we go parabolic. Now, for me, I'm going to continue to watch this. I think we could see something along the lines of this. It's just going to have to kind of consolidate on an even longer basis. I don't know exactly how it's going to look, but this is the new trend line that I believe it's forming. And so I think that we should pay attention for this because this is the way that all 3 cycles have played out in times past. Every cycle has to break the previous trend line before we can start a new parabolic one in its place. And so there's going to be a lot of people that will be feeding you fear, feeding you new lows. But to be honest, I think that this is capitulation and we're just starting that new parabolic trend. But keep in mind, I could be wrong. This is not financial advice. Do with this analysis what you will. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys found any value in this, always remember to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to this channel for more updates. Click that notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos like the one provided for you here. Make sure you guys check out my video course in signals. Both of those are going to be inside of the Discord, which is totally free for you guys to join if you don't want access to any of the exclusive content. So make sure you guys join by clicking the invitation link in the description of this video, and there you're going to get access to my Discord server. Once you have access, shoot me a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. With all that being said, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video. As always, peace out.